Somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, a man stepped out of a pressurized cabin at 10,000 feet, and the world never saw him again. November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, Portland International Airport, 2:58 in the afternoon. A man purchased a one-way ticket for Northwest Orient Flight 35 to Seattle. He paid cash. He gave his name as Dan Coopper. Witnesses described him as calm, middle-aged, a dark suit, a plain tie, a briefcase resting across his knees. Somewhere over southern Washington, he passed a note to a flight attendant. It said he had a bomb. He demanded $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle. Every demand was met. The passengers were released. The plane refueled. Then, somewhere between Seattle and Reno, he strapped on a parachute and jumped into the dark. No body was ever found, no parachute, almost none of the money. The FBI investigated for 45 years and closed the active case in 2016, unsolved. It remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in American commercial aviation history, and it might have stayed that way. In the spring of 2019, a water-damaged journal was recovered from a storage unit in Missoula, Montana. The owner of the unit had died intestate. No next of kin was ever identified. The journal had no name on the cover, only a date stamped inside the front board, November 25, 1971. Forensic analysis confirmed the paper stock was consistent with manufacturing runs from the late 1960s and early 1970s. The ink chemistry matched commercial ballpoint formulations discontinued before 1980. The handwriting was even unhurried. Whoever wrote it was not afraid. They were recording something they believed they had already survived. From the journal, the cold was the first thing. Not the fall itself, the cold, like stepping into a room no one had ever breathed in. The jump occurred somewhere over the Cascade Range, in near-zero visibility, at an estimated 200 miles per hour of wind shear. Survival was considered by most experts unlikely. From the journal, I had rehearsed the coordinates. I knew where the tree line broke. What I had not rehearsed was the silence after the chute opened. This single detail stopped investigators who reviewed the journal. The FI's own flight reconstruction had never been made public. The coordinates were not guesswork. The parachutes provided to Coopper included one that was non-functional, a training dummy. He chose a different one. He chose correctly. From the journal, they thought the dummy chute would slow me. It only told me what I already knew, that someone on the ground was still trying to decide which side they were on. Someone on the ground. The journal implied, from its very first pages, that DBB Coopper was not acting alone, and that he had known, before he ever boarded the plane, that he was being watched. The money itself was carefully prepared. The FI had recorded every serial number, 21 pounds of unmarked 20s, bundled in a canvas bank bag. From the journal, the bag was heavier than I expected. Not the weight of money, the weight of what money means when no one is watching. In February 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram found a small bundle of the ransom bills on the banks of the Columbia River, partially buried, decomposing but real. Only 290 bills were recovered. The remaining 9,710 were never found. Where the rest went has never been explained. From the journal, 3 bundles went into the river deliberately. Insurance, not for me, but for the story. A body of evidence requires a body. The implication was staggering. If the journal was authentic, the bills had not drifted there by accident. They had been placed, years after the jump, to confirm a death that never happened. Forensic geologists had long puzzled over the bills' position. The sediment layer surrounding them was inconsistent with a 1971 deposit. The journal offered, for the first time, a reason why. From the journal, I had 9 years to think about where to leave them. 9 years is long enough to become someone else entirely and to miss who you were. 9 years. If the entry was truthful, the writer had been alive and living undetected from 1971 to at least 1980, moving, watching, waiting for the right moment to plant the only clue ever found. From the journal, the boy who found them, I watched from the tree line. He looked exactly the way I had hoped, surprised, innocent, certain he had discovered something lost. The boy's name was Brian Ingram. He was 8 years old. He had been digging in the sand with his hands when the corner of a rotting bundle appeared. The Columbia River shoreline near Tennebar, Washington. A family picnic. A discovery that would reopen a cold case the FI had quietly begun to let go. From the journal, the river was not random. Nothing was random. I had learned by then that randomness is only what other people see when they cannot follow the logic. Investigators noted that the bills had been bound with rubber bands that had long since disintegrated, yet the bundles retained a partial shape inconsistent with years of open water exposure. The sediment analysis was never fully resolved. Geologist Leonard Palmer concluded the bills could not have arrived at that location through normal river drift. His findings were filed and largely ignored. From the journal, Palmer was closer than the others. I read his report in a library in Eugene. I remember thinking he deserved to know, but knowing would have cost him something. Eugene, Oregon, a city, a library. A man reading about himself in a government report and choosing silence. The journal placed its writer in the Pacific Northwest, hiding in plain sight. Over the decades, more than 1,000 suspects were formally investigated. Soldiers, engineers, pilots, drifters. Each was ruled out. None left a journal. From the journal, I was on that list. I know because I put myself there, early enough to be dismissed, late enough to have already moved on. Misdirection is not deception. It is architecture. No when. Architecture. The word appeared 3 times in the journal. Not metaphor. Instruction. As though the writer had not simply escaped, but designed an escape that was meant to be studied. The FI's behavioral profile described Cooper as someone with above-average intelligence and possible military or parachute training. It was, in hindsight, a significant underestimation. From the journal, they profiled a man who acted alone out of desperation. Desperation leaves traces. I had none because I had not been desperate in a very long time. Among the suspects formally investigated was a man named Richard Floyd McCoy, who hijacked another aircraft just 4 months after Cooper, using a nearly identical method. He was caught. He denied being Cooper. From the journal, McCoy was not me, but he had read the same manuals. That was the part that unsettled me. I had not written anything down, and yet someone had found the same door. The journal referenced manuals, plural. Investigators familiar with the case noted that Cooper's jump technique suggested familiarity with low-altitude military egress procedures, not civilian sport parachuting. From the journal, the exit angle was everything. I had practiced it in my mind for 11 months. By the time I stood at the stairs, my body already knew what to do. The mind was almost unnecessary. 11 months. The journal placed the beginning of the plan in December 1970, a detail that aligned with no previously known suspect timeline and that the FI had never publicly considered. From the journal, December 1970. I had just come back from somewhere I am not going to name. What I brought back with me was not a plan, it was a certainty. Plans can fail. Certainties are different. Somewhere he would not name. The journal's deliberate omissions were as telling as its disclosures, a writer who had survived by knowing exactly what to leave out. From the journal, there are things I will not write here, not because I am afraid of being found, but because some knowledge, once recorded, belongs to whoever reads it. And I am not finished with it yet. All finest with it. The journal's next entries shifted in tone. The handwriting remained steady, but the sentences grew shorter, clipped, precise, like a man rationing words. From the journal, I had a name for the years after the jump. I called them the white years, not because they were empty, because they left no shadow. The white years. Between 1971 and the early 1980s, the FI received over 10,000 tips. None led anywhere. The case did not go cold, it went quiet. From the journal, quiet is not the same as safe. Quiet means they have stopped looking in the right places. I moved every 14 months, never longer. 14 months. The interval was specific enough to suggest a system, not paranoia, but discipline. The journal described movement as a practice, like breathing. From the journal, I worked, always something with my hands, not because I needed the money, but because a man without work is a man people remember. The FII's own behavioral analysts had noted that Cooper showed no signs of improvisation on the aircraft. Every request was measured. Every response, calm. He had done this before, or something very like it. From the journal, the flight attendants were kind. I want to say that clearly. They were doing their jobs, and I was doing something else entirely. I was sorry for the inconvenience. I am still sorry. It was the only passage in the journal that expressed anything resembling remorse. Analysts who reviewed it noted that the apology was directed at the crew, never at the airline, never at the FBI. From the journal, I have thought about what I took. Not the money, the afternoon. In hijacking, I took an afternoon from people who had done nothing. That is the only thing I would undo, if undoing were possible. The journal went quiet after that passage. Several pages were left blank, not torn, not damaged, simply empty, as though the writer had needed space that words could not fill. From the journal, the blank pages are not silence. They are the years I lived well. I did not think it was right to write those down. To sound dissepper. The years he lived well. The phrase suggested not guilt, not exile, but something closer to contentment. A man who had not merely survived his disappearance, but settled into it. From the journal, I had a neighbor who grew tomatoes. We talked about weather every morning for 6 years. He never asked where I came from. That is the kindest thing one person can do for another. 6 years in one place. It contradicted the 14-month interval he had described earlier, suggesting, perhaps, that at some point he had stopped running and simply begun to live. From the journal, at some point the escape becomes the life. I cannot tell you exactly when that happened. I only know that one morning I woke up and the plan was gone, and I was still there. The FI formally suspended active investigation of the DB Cooper case in July 2016, 45 years after the hijacking. The file remains officially open, but no new leads are being pursued. From the journal, I heard they stopped looking. I did not feel what I expected to feel. Relief, perhaps, but also something smaller, something that felt almost like disappointment. Disappointment. The word sat at the center of the entry, like a stone, a man who had outrun the largest manhunt in FBI history, and found, in the silence that followed, something unexpectedly like loneliness. From the journal, I am writing this because at some point a thing has to be witnessed, not by a court, not by a file, by someone who simply reads it and understands that it happened. The journal did not end with confession. It ended with something quieter, a request for witness from a man who had spent 50 years being no one. From the journal, I am old now. The body keeps its own records. My knees remember the landing better than my mind does. A hard, wet field, and then silence, and then the rest of my life. A hard, wet field. The landing site was never found, despite decades of searches across the Cascade Mountains. No parachute, no gear, no physical trace of the jump was ever recovered. From the journal, the chute is still there. I buried it, not because I was afraid, because it deserved to stay with the trees. It had done its work, so had I. The journal was submitted to 3 independent forensic document examiners. All 3 confirmed the paper stock, ink composition, and handwriting aging were consistent with production between 1971 and 1995. From the journal, I never spent the rest of the money. That surprises people when I tell them, though I have told almost no one. It was never about the money. It was about the question of whether it could be done. The money was never about the money. Investigators had long debated Cooper's motive, ransom, ideology, desperation. The journal offered a different answer, proof of concept, a bourse. From the journal, the question was simple. Could a man disappear completely, not by dying, not by hiding, but by becoming ordinary? I believe I have answered it. I believe the answer is yes. No. Becoming ordinary. The most sophisticated vanishing act in American criminal history may not have required wilderness survival or foreign escape, only the discipline to be unremarkable every single day. From the journal, if you are reading this, then I am already gone, or I am sitting somewhere very close to where you imagine I would never be. Both of those things can be true at once. The journal's final entry was dated with no year, only a season. Autumn, it said. The leaves were doing what they always do. From the journal, I watched them fall this morning from a window I have sat at for years. They do not wonder where they are going. That is the only kind of peace I have ever trusted. The journal ends there. No signature, no name, no final declaration. Only the image of a man at a window, watching something fall, and finding in it, at last, enough. D.B. Cooper has never been identified. The case file remains open. Somewhere, the trees above a wet field in the Cascades have grown 30 feet taller since the night he landed among them, and kept his secret.